The number of the beast changed everything. And that sentence is the best way to describe this album. This album marks a new start for Iron Maiden. It marks the start of the era with Bruce Dickinson from 82 to 92. It marks the start of the golden era, which goes from Number of the Beast to Power Slave, or Number of the Beast to Seventh Son. It marks the start of big, beautiful Steve Harris epics. Every album that Iron Maiden do for the rest of the 1980s would be structurally very similar to this album, because this album set the template of how they would make an album for the rest of the 1980s, and for the rest of the golden era. And a big thing to note, Bruce Dickinson. Now, after Paul Di'Anno left because of his alcohol and drug abuse, they inducted Bruce Dickinson, previously of Samson. And in Samson, Bruce Dickinson was definitely not singing as good as he could have. It's only when Bruce Dickinson met Steve Harris, in my opinion, did he truly find himself as a vocalist. Now, even though I like Paul Di'Anno and I like bluesy, punky kind of vocals, Bruce Dickinson completely knocks him out of the water. His range is ridiculously high. He's technically just such a good singer, up there with Ronnie James Dio, Jeff Tate, Rob Halford. He's one of the greatest. When you think of a good heavy metal vocalist, you think of Bruce Dickinson. Now, Clive Burr definitely does his best performance with Iron Maiden on this album. Even though he's not technically as good as Nico, he definitely turns in a good performance on this album. Dave Murray and Adrian Smith on this album create the twin lead attack that Iron Maiden would become so famous for the rest of the 1980s. Even though they replaced Dennis Stratton with Adrian Smith on Killers, it's really only on this album that that twin lead really shows and really starts. Now, continuing with the history, this album is famously extremely controversial, and the controversy surrounding it is extremely famous, so I don't want to talk about that for too long, but basically, to summarize it, the Number of the Beast has satanic meanings, and a lot of conservative Christians in America got really mad and started calling Steve Harris and Bruce Dickinson and Iron Maiden a bunch of Satanists and burning this album and all that kind of crap. But anyway, that kind of stuff doesn't affect the quality of the album, so I'm not even going to talk about it that much. Now, this album was recorded, I believe, in between 1 and 2 months, which is an extremely short amount of time of recording. During this whole period from about 1980 to 85, it was record an album, go on tour, write music for the next album, record it, go on tour. It was just no breaks. They keep having to work on either new material or go on tour. It wasn't till the end of the World Slavery Tour that they took a good long break. And for the other 2 albums with Bruce, Peace of Mind and Power Slave, they were also recorded extremely quickly, and that's because the band were in their musical prime. They could write good music like that. They could just get in there, you put Steve Harris, Adrian, Dave, Bruce, and Clive or Nico in the same room, and between 1982 and 84, they just wrote good music. The stars aligned, as I think Steve Harris put it. The production, again done by Martin Birch, completely steps it up from Killers. This is a completely different sound. It sounds a lot more epic. It sounds bigger. It sounds like you're listening to something important, not just another kind of bluesy, punky band. It sounds like you're listening to something that truly matters. Now, I want to talk about the artwork for a bit now. The artwork is my favorite piece of Iron Maiden artwork, and it is just beautiful. If you haven't seen it and you're a metal fan, well, what are you even doing? Just go look at it, and go listen to this album as well while you're at it. The original is not as good because the blue is not how it was originally painting. That was a misprint. However, on the 1998 reissue, they got the really good black one, which is my personal favorite, and I think it looks way better than the blue one. And even though I think Iron Maiden and Killers, the artwork was just really cool, just a really nice picture of Eddie, this one is just so original, with Eddie kind of puppeteering Satan and Satan puppeteering Eddie again, so it's kind of like who's controlling who. And it's just the idea of it was just so good. I believe the artwork done by Derek Riggs, by the way, was originally for the single cover for Purgatory, but the band deemed it too good for just a single, so they instead saved it for this album, which is a great decision. I always thought that the single cover for Purgatory was a bit weak. But anyway, that was just a really general kind of summarized history. This period of time for the band was very well documented. There's lots of essays and writings that you can look up for the history. That was just going over it very generally. But anyway, I don't want this review to go on too long, so I'm just going to go into the track by track. Invaders is the first track, and unfortunately, it's not a very good opener. Nowhere near as good as Prowler or Aces High. I think this song shouldn't have been an opener. If it was around the kind of middle of the album, then you could just kind of listen to it and get over it. But an opener, I think it should be one of the better songs on the album. But that's just my opinion. Now, talking more about the actual song, it has a good opening riff, and it starts out really good. Kind of gets you kind of pumped for the album when you listen to it. But what lets it down is the chorus. It's just a really weak chorus. Sounds quite uninspired, and for an opening track, it doesn't really show off Bruce's vocals. You know, you'd think for the opening track, you'd want a really big kind of epic song to show off Bruce's vocals. But this kind of falls short a little bit for me. One of the weaker songs on the album. And then that goes into Children of the Damned, which is the slower song, the ballady kind of song on this album. And it is great. Bruce's vocals are, as I've mentioned on Iron Maiden and Killer's review, very, very good for this kind of more emotional, slower kind of tempo and pace. His voice is just so great on this song. But what really makes this song very good is the last half. The last half of this song is just really memorable. The first half, you're kind of not too sure about that, but then the last half really just saves the song. The next track is The Prisoner, and it's a really cool opening. It sets up a good vibe for this song, kind of lets you know what the song's about. And the rest of the song is just kind of written around this idea lyrically that, you know, a prisoner is not a number, he's a free man. However, the opening I don't actually think is that strong. The riff just isn't that good, doesn't kind of captivate you like some of the other riffs on this album. However, what saves it is the last half, where a guitar line just comes out of nowhere, and it's a great guitar line. And this kind of goes into a solo, and it's a great, great guitar solo. And that just makes this song really worth listening to. However, by the end, it feels a little bit repetitive. Although, like all the other songs on this album, basically, it's really catchy, really good, really easy to listen to. Even the worst tracks on this album are still good because they're still catchy, and you can still just listen to them and enjoy them. And then we go into 22 Accacia Avenue, and this is sort of part 2 of the Charlotte the Harlot trilogy, which started on Charlotte the Harlot, obviously, off Iron Maiden. And this song is great. Unlike the Prisoner, it's the opening that's really good. You know, the opening verses are really catchy, really captivate you, really get you into the song. And there's a really funny line, 50 quid is all she needs, which is pretty funny. Charlotte the Harlot is a fictional prostitute, if you didn't know. However, the rest of the song is a little bit underwhelming, and by the end, it kind of feels a bit repetitive, to be honest. And then we go into the title track, Number the Beast, and wow, this is the best Bruce Dickinson vocal performance on this album, in my opinion. His vocals are so powerful, so captivating. He makes you believe that he is a Satanist when he says, "The ritual has begun, Satan's work is done." I can't blame the conservative Christians for thinking he's a Satanist, because he makes you believe that he is a Satanist in this song. And the vocals are just so good, it doesn't even feel repetitive. This song doesn't have that many kind of different or interesting musical lines, but it never feels repetitive. It just makes you want to keep listening and keep listening because the vocal performance is so good. But by far, my favorite part of the song is the opening, and when you got that really simple guitar line that's really fast, and then you've got Bruce going with the really low kind of singing, but then there's that really, really loud high section, but then it goes back again, and I just really like that. I think that makes the song a really, really good song. And the next track is Run to the Hills. Now, Run to the Hills was the first single of this album, I believe, and it was released even before the album was released. And this is a really catchy track, and a really good one, too. It's about Native Americans and white European settlers. And, you know, it's just a really catchy track. You know, Bruce does some really high notes, shows off his vocals. But by far my favorite part is when, sort of in the middle, you've got Steve Harris's bass building, and you've got Bruce going from really low to really high. And this is one of my favorite moments because at the very, very end, Bruce just completely screams at the top of his lung, and Clive Burr goes down the toms, and that moment is just so great, because after the building, and then you go down the toms, and then another chorus. That bit is just so great and makes the song extremely memorable. And then this goes into Gangland, which is written by Adrian Smith and Clive Burr, and not by Steve Harris, which is why it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, this song is probably the worst on the album, but it's not terrible. It's not that much worse than maybe Invaders or The Prisoner. It's just kind of more of a fillerish kind of track. Nothing really that special, kind of average, but it doesn't take up too much time, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the quality of the album, in my opinion. And then there is Hallowed Be Thy Name, which sucks. It's a terrible closer to the album. I'm just kidding. This song is amazing. It's a Steve Harris epic, and that's the best way to describe it. It is epic. It's not even that long, but by the end of the song, you feel like you've been on a journey with the guy who's about to die. And before I actually go on to talk about the song, I want to mention one thing. This song on Live After Death is way, way better. And I like the slow part when it's really, really slow, like they play it on Live After Death, because the vibe is created even more, just kind of building, and then the fast part is just super fast. And now every time I listen to the original on the album, the slow part doesn't feel slow enough and the fast part doesn't feel fast enough. And the thing that keeps driving the song along is the famous riff. And this riff is one of the best riffs on this album. It is a riff I will never forget, and it was definitely worthy for the rest of this song. And this song, more than any other, showcases the twin leads of Dave Murray and Adrian Smith, sort of towards the end, when it's just before he goes into the final verse, Hallowed Be Thy Name. It's got the twin lead bit, which is just so, so great. And I always considered the sort of first bit of this song to be kind of the build-up, and when it's after the second verse and you've got that really long guitar section, I kind of always imagine that as when the guy is sort of walking to his death, and then the final Hallowed Be Thy Name is his last words before he's hung or shot or something. And I really could go on about this song for another 5 minutes, but this review is already long enough as it is, so I will just leave you with this. You have to listen to the song. Even if you're not going to listen to the whole album, listen to this one song. Please. And this album is truly great. If you want to tell somebody who wants to get into Iron Maiden and they ask you, what album should I listen to first? Say The Number of the Beast. It's their landmark album. It's the most important album. I don't think it's their best. I will definitely talk about that later, which album I think is their best. But it's definitely a great album. Similar to Iron Maiden and Killers, it's very short. You could just listen to it. It's so easy to listen to. There are no bad tracks. There are just kind of fillerish tracks that aren't even that long. And that concludes the review. I will give The Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden a 9.5 out of 10. Later.